On Reddit, a user by the name of Tuber the G made an elimination game. It's a straw poll where the subreddit of Metroid voted as a collective to determine which game should be kicked out per round to find out who's the winner. Since it is voted by the community, the answers are decided by the community, and probably with my vote contributing to a total of 0.01%. As mentioned before, this list is decided by Reddit, and it is not my list of how I rank them. So let's go through the top 14 worst to best Metroid games voted by you, the fans, and see who comes out on top and who comes out dead last. If there's anything on this list that you disagree with, don't turn your hatred on me. This is all from Reddit. Now enough talking, and let's jump straight into it, starting with Number 14. Metroid Other End. Perhaps it is no surprise to anyone that Other End is at the very bottom of this list. It was a game released in 2010, taking place between Super Metroid and Metroid Fusion, going for a more storytelling approach, but in doing so, it limited the exploration that has been seen in the Metroid franchise. And while the gameplay can be considered good, many thought that it was too easy, as Samus was able to recharge missiles and health at any point of the game. Also, spamming sense move is the thing, but what made this game really decisive is that it showed another side of Samus as a character that the fans were not expecting. People to this day consider Other End to be a blemish to the series due to the way the game portrayed Samus, with how she seeks authorization from Adam and the infamous scene of Samus vs Ridley. Other End takes the very last spot in 14th place with 47.29% vote, which is about 122 people voting against it. Number 13. Metroid Prime Federation Force. Another controversial game that had mediocre gameplay and perhaps released at the worst timing possible. Metroid Prime Federation Force released in 2016 as the next Metroid game in the franchise after the long radio silence with Other End's release. Everything that could go wrong went wrong with the game. The game focused on a generic Galactic Federation soldier, with the graphic style focusing on chibi graphics where they had big heads and small body, instead of a semi-realistic tone Metroid fans have experienced for years. With the main focus on co-op gameplay, the game had two modes to play, a campaign mode allowing either single or multiplayer gameplay, or the other mode, which is a Rocket League clone called Blast Ball, a 3 vs 3 gameplay to get a ball into the enemy's goalpost to score a point. But the clunky controls on the 3DS certainly didn't help to make this game enjoyable at all, and the fact that almost no one bought Prime Federation Force mean you had no one to play with. Metroid Prime Federation Force takes 13th place with an overwhelming vote of 60.88% vote, which is about 235 people voting against it. Number 12. Metroid 1986. The one that started it all. The original Metroid. The game was released back in 1986 on the Nintendo Entertainment System with roaring success with close to 3 million sales. While it is revolutionary for its time, age hasn't been kind to this game at all. This game is what many consider to be Nintendo hard. What is Nintendo hard? Think of Dark Souls difficulty, but harder. And that is perhaps what made this game to not be looked favorably in current day. While the game can be appreciated for what it is and the legacy it brought forth, introducing the first playable human female character, introducing the Metroidvania subgenre, and introducing different ending based on clear time, encouraging speedrunning. But the game is now a relic, and the fans agree, with a 35.01% vote, which is about 223 people voting against it. Number 11. Metroid Prime Pinball. A Metroid game, but not really a Metroid game, that released around 2005 or 2006, depending on your region. This is a pinball remake of the original Metroid Prime game, but with the gameplay transferred into pinball instead. So the game features no Metroidvania gameplay, but you still play as Samus, albeit as her morph ball form instead, getting into that pinball action. The game is a meme to the community at this point, with jokes about the game being the best Metroid game in the franchise. But even memes can't save this game from taking the 11th place in the Metroid community fan poll, with a total of 33.78% vote, which is about 103 people voting against it. Number 10. Metroid Prime Hunters, a multiplayer-focused game where it is the first game to introduce other hunters in the Metroid universe. The game first released at 2006, and it was Nintendo's take on the hero shooter before hero shooters became popular, and it had a really solid foundation with the multiplayer death battle arena-like gameplay. But because the game focused mostly on the multiplayer aspect, the single-player experience took a big hit, as it features mostly the same puzzles and the same boss. But for a spin-off title, the game really marks its own identity by introducing the only bearable multiplayer mode in the Metroid franchise, and many who has played the game has favourable opinions of the game. Having said all that, this game still falls out of the race, taking the 10th spot with a total of 47.66% vote, which is about 214 people voting against it. Number 9. Metroid 2 Return of Samus. Another blast from the past. Metroid 2 Return of Samus released in 1991 or 1992, depending on the region, and it was the first Metroid game to be on the handheld system. The graphics are very dated as it was released back on the very first Game Boy, where it features monotone colors. The game takes place after the first Metroid game, where the story focused on Samus annihilating all the Metroids to keep the galaxy at peace. While the game didn't do anything revolutionary compared to its predecessor and its successor, Super Metroid, it did do something right that would forever solidify Samus' design. Due to the limitation of the color in the Game Boy system, the developers had to think of a way to differentiate the base Power Suit and the iconic Varia Suit, and thus, Samus' iconic bulky shoulder Varia Suit was born. But the game was voted out with another overwhelming vote of 69.05%. which is about 328 people voting against the game. Number 8. Metroid Samus Returns. Again with Metroid 2, but this time it is the 2017 remake of the game for the 3DS. Metroid Samus Return is the return to form for Samus, truly a fitting title to signal the return of Samus in her prime after two controversial releases with Metroid Other End and Prime Federation Force. The game is a retelling of Return of Samus, with remade 3D graphics featuring new power-ups, new story, and new bosses. The Achilles heel of this game, however, is its over-reliance on the melee counter mechanic, making the game feel sluggish at times, as you have to wait for the enemy to make the first move. But to rub salt into injury, Fusion mode can only be unlocked with an amiibo, and perhaps because of this, and the melee counter mechanic, it managed to bring Metroid Samus Returns to the 8th spot, with 45.66% votes, which is about 279 people voting against it. Number 7. Metroid Prime 3 Corruption. The third game in the Metroid Prime trilogy, released in 2007, and it's the first and only game to allow you to travel to multiple planets at any time you want. Prime Corruption feels like a game where if the dev took one feature from the original Prime game and made it the main focus of the game, being the hyper mode, this is what the game feels like. Because the game was on the Wii, it had a completely different playstyle compared to the games that came before it, providing an interactive first-person player experience where you aim by actually aiming at the screen with the remote, and you can perform a grapple lasso by tugging your nunchuck towards you. It was a game that did many things right, and ended the long battle between Samus and Metroid Prime, aka Dark Samus. But so too will its legacy end at 7th place, as it had a 44.7% votes, which is about 232 people voting against it. Number 6. Metroid Prime 2 Echoes. The next to go is the second game in the Prime trilogy, released in 2004. The game took a page out of Zelda's book and introduced a light and dark world taking place in the world of Ether. Echoes was very daring for its time, introducing a new system that replaced the old tried and true formula of the franchise. For you see, Echoes have an ammo system, where you can only use certain beams for a limited amount of time, usually a system that only exists for missiles. The beams are now to be used strategically as well. Perhaps the ammo system was a relic from the semi-abandoned multiplayer mode that came with the game, whom the devs have expressed regrets on ever creating. The game was considered controversial at the time, but these days, the game is viewed more favorably upon looking back by fans, and some would even consider it better than the original Prime, but I guess it didn't matter in the end, because the game fell out of the race and landed itself on the 6th place with 36.62% votes, which is about 245 people voting against it. Number 5. Metroid Zero Mission. Now we are in the top 5 territory, and the first to go will be Metroid Zero Mission. Released in 2004 for the Game Boy Advance, this game, much like Metroid Samus Returns, is a retelling of another game, being the original Metroid, but everything has been remade. The location, bosses, and it even have cutscenes now. But what's best of all, in my opinion, is the extra area the post-game credit have in place, introducing new lore and shining a light into Samus' history and her ties with the Chozo. For the first time in the series, the game allowed us to play as Samus in the Zero Suit, with a unique gameplay that is more akin to a stealth mission. It is a truly marvelous remake, and it well deserves the 5th spot, but unfortunately, it was voted out by 389 people, which is a total of 44.36%. Number 4. Metroid Fusion. Perhaps to everyone's surprise, Metroid Fusion from 2002 landed 4th spot in the race. This game is considered by many as the black sheep of the franchise. The new look of Samus, doing away with the iconic orange juggernaut look of the Varia suit, and instead sporting a slimmer blue fitting suit known as the Fusion suit. But that's not the only thing it did away with. It was the very first game to cast away the Metroidvania gameplay, and instead focused more on the story and lore of Metroid, and in doing so, it had to sacrifice the openness seen in previous games, making the game more linear compared to many of the previous and future Metroid games. It also had tough as nail bosses, which are some of the few reasons that made this game the black sheep. But that didn't stop Metroid Fusion, as it has won its way to the hearts of many fans, reaching 4th place, only losing to what is considered the best in the series. Fusion was voted out by a whopping 411 people, which only made up for 44.29%. The battle is getting really excited now, but among the three, there's Super Metroid, Metroid Dread, and Prime. Cast your vote now. Who do you think is 3rd, 2nd, and 1st? With the decision locked in, it's time to march on and find out who came number 3. Number 3. Super Metroid. Super Metroid is a legacy of a game. It was originally designed to be the swan song to the Metroid franchise, the very last game to send it off to the high heavens. But we all know that future didn't come into fruition, and now, many games today aspire to be like Super Metroid. This game was the very first game to define the Metroidvania gameplay, setting the trends of what meets the requirement to be a Metroidvania. It was the OG, but perhaps because it was the trendsetter that it lost. It was the first to come, but that means it will carry old school game design that is not as welcomed anymore. Super Metroid is still mighty impressive though, as it stood the test of time, with the only complaint being the controls, which isn't noticeable unless you came from later Metroid games. Super Metroid barely lost out to Dread and Prime, with Super Metroid having a total of 559 votes, totaling to 37.44%, versus Metroid Dread, sitting at 33.09%, totaling to 494 votes against it, and Prime at 29.47%, with 440 votes against it. Who will come first? There are only 2 choices at this point: Metroid Dread, released in 2019, and Metroid Prime in 2002, and 2023 with a remastered version. The answer will be revealed in 3, 2, 1. Number 2. Metroid Dread. It was a very close battle, but it appears Metroid Dread lost this bout. The latest entry to Samus' adventure, with the long-running name of the main character being Metroid, is finally a Metroid. This game was amazing in its own right, but it wasn't amazing enough. The game does have weaknesses, and its weaknesses are very apparent, with the repetitive boss battles, repetitive enemy escapes, and too many button presses. So that's it for Dread. But even though this is the end for Metroid Dread, landing in 2nd place, it is not the end of Samus' adventures. Now hopefully this game serves as a learning curve for Mercury's team, so that when they make Metroid 6, it is even better, much like how they improved from Samus Returns to Dread. So that leaves number 1. Number 1. Metroid Prime. Metroid Prime wins. It was a tough battle, but it shows that Shigeru Miyamoto's quote is something every developer should always strive for. A delayed game is eventually good. A bad game is forever bad. Prime is a tale about a troubled development company that wasn't even able to create a single game, decided that they want to stick it to everyone who doubted them. They poured their blood, sweat and tears to create this masterpiece that even decades later, it is appreciated by the fans. With the news of Metroid Prime Remastered reaching 1.09 million sales, this should show Retro that people are still excited for Metroid Prime 4. Metroid Dread lost the battle with 51.61% vote, totaling to 995 people voting against it, while Prime won with a 48.39% vote, totaling to 933 people voting against it. This means that Prime managed to squeeze a victory with 3.22%, which is 62 vote count difference. Truly a tough battle for all the games involved, but that's it for this top list. It was an amazing 13 days journey to find out which game the fans liked the most. I'm going to end this video here now, but did any of the placements surprise you? Or did you expect all of these games to fall where they are? Let me know on the comments below, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now.